ESPN figured out a way to come up with an argument that Caitlin Clark isn't one of the 5 greatest women's college basketball players of all time, and it's because she didn't win a title. Let's watch the clip as ESPN analysts talk themselves out of Caitlin Clark being one of the 5 greatest women's basketball players.
Love Caitlin, love how she's transcended the game. I'm not going to go away from that, but in the open, we said, what makes a top 5 player? Winning. The only strike against Caitlin Clark is that she has not won a national championship. And that is the only thing that you can put against her, because the way she has dominated the record books when she was at Iowa was something you cannot duplicate. She's a 3-time NCAA scoring leader and assist leader, a true point guard for the people, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year, 2-time AP Player of the Year, all-time leading scorer. She broke the records of Kelsey Plum and Sabrina. Like, literally, there is nobody who has been such a front-facing name through a direct reflection of her skill set. But how can you be a top 5 player if you have not won a title?
It's a great point, which is why I agree with you. Convince me, Ari. We're switching them back.
Again, we read Cheryl Miller's resume. She's a winner. She's a winner multiple times. Yeah. But, I have a really hard time. It's, paining me to leave Caitlin off this list because of the records, because of what she's done outside of those 94 feet. She has really thrust women's basketball in the mainstream. She has collected her individual accolades. I
get it. I hear you. I get it.
Hope.
All right, Steve. Caitlin Clark took Iowa to back-to-back national championship games.
I mean, she didn't win, though. She didn't win.
Kate Martin, but Breanna Stewart, who's on this list, played at UConn with a bunch of other pros, a bunch of other WNBA players. This comes down to whether you believe being a part of a stacked team at UConn or South Carolina and winning a national championship, is that more impressive than sticking with your little home school, not surrounded by great talent, and carrying them all the way to the brink of championships back-to-back years? What's more impressive? Doing more with less, or doing the best you can with the best there is?
I mean, Jason, I would argue, and me being the women's college basketball historian that I am, that young lady there in Iowa City did more with less than anybody. And people say, well, she's like Pistol Pete Maravich. Maravich never went to the Final Four or the final game. And look, in my view, because of where I grew up, I am biased and how old I am, you will never tell me there was a better women's basketball player than the great Cheryl Miller. Okay, to the day I die, I will die on that hill. It is Cheryl Miller. But Cheryl Miller had a loaded USC team. She had the McGee sisters and I believe Cynthia Cooper. That's major league talent, okay? Every other girl, or lady that was listed because they won, they probably had at least 2 or 3 All-Americans or players that probably had long WNBA careers if it was afforded to them. I have a question for you, Jason. Do you believe Larry Bird is an all-time great college player?
Yes.
Okay, well, he didn't win it, though.
Question.
Right, but he didn't win it. Can you name me a single player that he had? Maybe you can't because you're an Indiana guy. But think about this and what's unfair. And I am a Magic Johnson Laker homer, no doubt. But when they say, well, and Magic beat him in the Final Four in 79. Right. Okay. Michigan State was a Big Ten team. He also had 2 teammates that were NBA first-round draft choices in Greg Kelser and Jay Vincent. Okay. Larry Bird had a bunch of accountants, doctors, and lawyers who probably never dribbled a basketball for $1 in their life after their eligibility ran out in Terre Haute, Indiana. Do we not have some nuance to that? Jeez.
I think it was Carl Reed or Carl Nix. Carl Nix, I believe.
Carl Nix. He was a guard. He was a guard.
Yeah.
He was a guard.
Did they Alex Gilbert, Bobby Heaton. I remember the Brad Miley. I remember Steve Reed. But you know, I gotta search the research bank. I got a little assist here off of the internet. But yeah, I remember Carl Nicks for sure.
Yeah.
He was their second leading scorer and was a pretty good guard. Maybe he had a cup of coffee in the NBA. But you're right. Larry Bird did not, compared to what Magic was playing with, it was not even close. But here's something I find interesting in all of this, Steve, is that take the young black woman that was making the argument. I would tend to bet she would make the argument that when it comes to academic performance and why we should let certain people in universities, despite the fact their SAT scores may not be this or that, is they'll say, well, you know, the kind of poverty they had to overcome, they had to do less, or they had to do more with less. And so they can see all the extenuating circumstances around someone, and it elevates their greatness. Like, okay, yeah, maybe they didn't have a 1450 SAT score, but you know, they came from poverty, they went to a poor school, and so blah, blah, blah. And how that mindset and logic doesn't apply to, hey, she played at Iowa, it's not a powerhouse program. Kate Martin's in the WNBA, but she's not gonna be some kind of NBA star or whatever. I just don't understand how you can see someone doing more with less in some aspects, but in this one, you can't see it. You can't give them credit for that.
Yeah, don't forget the culturally biased SAT score. Remember that? That's first and foremost. But Jason, she listed off like she made All-American such and such time. The Naismith player there. I'm like, well, all of that. So none of that matters because she could not beat a stacked South Carolina team that probably had multiple players. I mean, there have been years, Jason. I remember one of the best jobs I've ever seen of coaching a team was Utah in '98 with Rick Majerus. And I remember thinking, wow, they had Andre Miller, and I don't even think Keith Van Horn was on that team, but they just had a lot of guys like Doliak. They had solid guys. And they were beating Kentucky for most of that game, and they ran out of bodies. And Kentucky was Kentucky. Tubby Smith had a great team. There wasn't a loaded Kentucky team, but it was still very, very talented. And I remember thinking Rick Majerus, in his own way, won a national title. It's not going to be official, but just to get that far with that Utah team says something. If there's no nuance then, well, in that case, there should never be a discussion then Bill Russell's the greatest athlete of all time in American sports. No one's winning 12, Jason. It's over. The guy won in the Olympics. The guy won at USF. He won every year in Boston, basically. So what? There's no nuance all of a sudden? I get it, but I don't get it.
Help us grow the Fearless Army. Pound that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with all your fearless friends.